In a quiet town where appearances matter more than truth, a 14-year-old boy's life is shattered by a single, humiliating encounter with the police. Jamal, a promising student with big dreams, is wrongfully accused and publicly humiliated, becoming the target of racial profiling in a place that prefers to look the other way. But when Amanda, a local journalist and the sister of one of the officers involved, witnesses the event, her pursuit of justice will uncover secrets buried deep within her own family. As Amanda digs deeper, she discovers a web of prejudice and hidden histories that bind her fate to Jamal's in ways she never imagined. Torn between her family and her conscience, Amanda must decide how far she's willing to go to right the wrongs of the past before it's too late. A Verdade Nas Sombras is a gripping story of injustice, redemption, and the haunting power of long-buried truths, with a shocking twist that will leave you questioning loyalties and the weight of family ties. This is a novel about the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it means facing the darkest parts of your own past. In a small rural town, Jamal, a 14-year-old black boy, is approached and publicly humiliated by two police officers while walking home from school. Accused of being involved in neighborhood thefts based solely on his appearance, he is brutally searched and treated like a criminal, despite being a model student and well-known in the community. The scene is witnessed by Amanda, a local journalist who has been fighting to expose corruption in the police force for years, but to no avail. As Amanda investigates Jamal's case, she discovers something shocking. One of the officers involved is her own adopted brother, who has been hiding dark secrets about his past and his true relationship with Jamal's family. As Amanda fights to bring justice to the boy, she is also forced to confront painful truths about her own family and the deep-rooted racism in the town. The turning point comes when Amanda, in her investigation, discovers that the origins of her brother's racism are linked to a tragic event involving his biological parents, and that Jamal, unbeknownst to her, carries a vital connection to his own family history. The quest for justice becomes a fight for personal redemption and the rebuilding of lost bonds. This story explores the devastating impact of racism, the search for justice and family ties torn apart by secrets from the past, with an emotional hook that questions how far someone would go to right the wrongs of their own family. The Truth in the Shadows, a story of secrets, injustice, and redemption. Jamal, a 14-year-old black teenager, sees his life turned upside down after being brutally humiliated by two police officers in a small rural town. Wrongly accused of shoplifting, Jamal, an exemplary student full of dreams, finds himself at the center of a racist incident that shakes the community. While everyone seems to ignore the boy's suffering, Amanda, a fearless local journalist, decides to investigate the case and expose the truth. What Amanda did not expect was that this search for justice would lead her to confront buried secrets of her own family. One of the officers involved is her adopted brother, and as Amanda delves deeper into the shadows of her past, she discovers a devastating connection between her family and Jamal's, a history of racism, tragedy, and guilt that has been kept quiet for years. As the truth comes to light, Amanda finds herself torn between her desire to protect her brother and her need to do what's right. In an unexpected twist, she realizes that Jamal's fight for justice is also her own fight for redemption. The Truth in the Shadows is a powerful story of prejudice, family secrets, and courage that challenges notions of identity and justice. In a shocking and emotionally charged finale, Amanda discovers that sometimes, to fix the present, you have to face the ghosts of the past. Jamal Anderson, 14 years old. Physical description: Jamal is tall for his age, with dark brown skin, short curly hair, and expressive brown eyes. He often wears casual school clothes, like hoodies and jeans, and carries a worn backpack. Backstory: a bright and ambitious student, Jamal excels in school and dreams of becoming an engineer. Raised by his hardworking single mother, he has faced prejudice throughout his life but has remained optimistic. The incident with the police shakes his faith in fairness and justice, leading him to question the world around him. Amanda Bennett, 32 years old. Physical description: Amanda is a petite woman with pale skin, straight shoulder-length auburn hair, and piercing green eyes. She dresses professionally, often seen in a blazer and jeans, carrying her ever-present notepad and camera. Backstory: Amanda grew up in the same town but left for college to pursue journalism. She returned to her hometown after years of reporting in the city, hoping to make a difference by uncovering corruption. Adopted as a child, she never felt fully connected to her family, especially her brother, whose behavior increasingly disturbs her. The case of Jamal becomes personal as she uncovers family secrets tied to systemic racism in the town. Officer Brian Bennett, 36 years old. Physical description: Brian is tall and broad-shouldered, with short blonde hair and a stern expression. His sharp blue eyes often betray his hidden emotions, and he wears his police uniform with a sense of pride. Backstory: Brian is Amanda's adoptive brother, a respected but hardened police officer in the town. He grew up in a strict household and was always favored over Amanda, which created tension between them. Although he loves his family, Brian harbors deep-seated prejudice, influenced by the town's racial history and his own personal demons. His involvement in Jamal's humiliation forces him to confront truths about himself and his family. Patricia Anderson, 40 years old. Physical description: Patricia is a tall, slender woman with deep brown skin and tightly coiled hair pulled into a bun. Her tired eyes reflect years of hardship, and she usually dresses in simple work uniforms. Backstory: Jamal's mother, Patricia, works 2 jobs to provide for her son. A proud and resilient woman, she's no stranger to the challenges of being a black single mother in a predominantly white town. The incident with Jamal devastates her, but she remains fiercely protective and determined to see justice done for her son, even as she faces systemic barriers. Description: a quaint town square with old-fashioned street lamps, brick buildings, and a central fountain. It's the heart of the town, where locals gather for events and news. Despite its picturesque appearance, it is a symbol of the town's deeply ingrained racism and division, with subtle reminders of its segregated past still present. Description: a modest, one-story house on the edge of town with chipped paint and a small front yard. The interior is cozy but worn, with second-hand furniture and family photos. It reflects the Andersons' financial struggles but is filled with warmth and love, a stark contrast to the hardships they face outside. Description: a sterile, utilitarian building made of gray stone, with a small front desk and rows of cramped offices. The atmosphere is tense, with an underlying current of hostility, especially towards people of color. The station is where many of the novel's confrontations take place, as Amanda uncovers its dark history. Description: a spacious 2-story house located in the wealthier part of town, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a white picket fence. The interior is pristine, almost cold, reflecting the distant relationships within the Bennett family. It represents the divide between Amanda and Brian's moral values and their upbringing. Description: a large park with towering oak trees and a small playground. It's a peaceful space on the surface, but it carries a history of racial tension, with unspoken rules about who belongs where. This is where Jamal is accosted by the police, marking a pivotal moment in the story. Cause: Jamal's innocent walk home from school. Effect: establishes Jamal's character and contrasts sharply with the events that follow. Cause: police approach Jamal based on racial profiling. Effect: the key conflict begins, showing Jamal's public humiliation. Cause: Amanda sees her brother humiliating Jamal. Effect: her internal conflict begins, as her loyalty to family clashes with her sense of justice. Cause: Jamal returns home, deeply shaken. Effect: his mother, Patricia, vows to fight for him, solidifying their desire for justice. Cause: Amanda reviews her footage and wrestles with whether to release it. Effect: builds tension as Amanda faces a crucial decision that will drive the rest of the story. Cause: Amanda confronts her brother, Brian, about the incident. Effect: Brian dismisses her concerns, leading Amanda to feel further conflicted. Cause: Amanda visits the town newspaper office, but her editor hesitates to publish the story. Effect: the town's reluctance to address systemic racism is revealed, frustrating Amanda. Cause: Amanda's parents learn about her recording, urging her to protect her brother. Effect: Amanda feels torn between her family and the truth, adding personal stakes. Cause: Patricia reaches out to Amanda, asking for help in exposing the police. Effect: Amanda is moved by Patricia's determination, tipping the scales in favor of justice. Cause: Amanda makes the difficult choice to publish the video. Effect: the video goes viral, setting off a storm of public outrage and personal consequences. Cause: the video of Jamal's humiliation spreads. Effect: some residents of the town react with support, while others defend the police, deepening divisions. Cause: Brian confronts Amanda over the video's release. Effect: their relationship fractures, and Brian's hidden resentment surfaces. Cause: Amanda meets with the police chief, who tries to discredit her and the video. Effect: Amanda realizes how deep the corruption goes, fueling her determination. Cause: Patricia organizes a community protest, rallying support for Jamal. Effect: tension in the town escalates, with more people questioning the police. Cause: Amanda's parents beg her to retract the story. Effect: Amanda stands her ground, further straining her relationship with them. Cause: Amanda begins investigating Brian's past and other cases of police misconduct. Effect: she uncovers patterns of racism and injustice, intensifying her pursuit of the cause. Amanda discovers a connection between her brother's behavior and a dark chapter in her family's history. Effect: she is forced to confront the racism within her own upbringing. Cause: Brian tries to cover up his past and regain control. Effect: his actions become more erratic, pushing him further into isolation. Cause: Amanda finds an old photograph that links her parents to Jamal's family. Effect: the revelation that her family may be connected to the source of the town's racism shakes Amanda to her core. Cause: Amanda confronts her parents about their involvement in the town's dark history. Effect: they reveal a buried secret about Brian's adoption and his true connection to Jamal's family. Cause: Amanda learns that Brian and Jamal are half-brothers through their biological father, a man from the town's past. Effect: this shocking revelation upends everything Amanda thought she knew about her family. Cause: Brian learns the truth about his heritage and reacts violently, unable to cope with the revelation. Effect: his mental state deteriorates, putting him at odds with both the town and Amanda. Cause: Jamal begins to learn more about his own family history from his mother. Effect: the weight of the past affects him deeply, but he gains strength from it, deciding to fight for change. Cause: Patricia reveals to Amanda the full extent of the town's systemic racism and its ties to their families. Effect: Amanda now understands the full picture and is more determined than ever to bring justice to Jamal. Cause: Amanda gathers evidence to expose not just Brian, but the entire police department's corrupt practices. Effect: the stage is set for the final confrontation, with Amanda fully aware of what's at stake. Cause: Amanda confronts Brian and the police chief with her findings. Effect: Brian breaks down, admitting his guilt but still struggling with his identity. Cause: the town holds a massive protest, led by Patricia and Jamal, demanding justice. Effect: the community begins to change as more people speak out against the police corruption. Cause: Brian, overwhelmed with guilt, tries to make amends by publicly confessing his role in the racist incident. Effect: his confession shakes the town, but it's unclear whether redemption is possible for him. Cause: the case against the police gains momentum, with the department forced to make changes. Effect: Jamal receives a public apology, but the scars of the incident remain. Cause: Amanda, having exposed the corruption and reconciled with her past, looks toward a future where the town might finally heal. Effect: the novel ends on a hopeful yet bittersweet note, with Amanda and Jamal realizing that true change will take time, but they are determined to continue the fight. The late afternoon sun bathed the streets of Willowbrook in a warm, golden hue, casting long shadows as Jamal Anderson made his way home from school. His worn backpack, heavy with books and the promise of a bright future, swayed with each step. Jamal was a tall boy for his age, with dark brown skin and short curly hair that framed his youthful face. His eyes sparkled with a mixture of hope and ambition. Dreams of becoming an engineer filled his mind as he walked the familiar route through town. The streets were quiet, save for the distant sound of cars and the occasional chirp of birds. He hummed softly to himself, thinking about the science project he and his friends were working on. They were building a small robot, and Jamal couldn't wait to show his mom their progress. The path home led him through Old Oak Park, a place he'd walked through countless times. The towering oak trees provided shade and a sense of peace, but today, there was an eerie stillness in the air. As he neared the park's entrance, Jamal felt a slight unease settle in his chest. He shrugged it off. After all, this was home, and he had no reason to fear the streets he knew so well. As Jamal entered the park, two police officers appeared from the other side of the path. He recognized them vaguely, as anyone who lived in Willowbrook would. Officer Brian Bennett, tall and broad-shouldered with a stern expression, stood out, his hand resting casually on the holster of his belt. The other officer, younger and less imposing, followed closely behind. Jamal's steps slowed as the officers approached. He had done nothing wrong, but the presence of the police made his heart race. He kept his head down, hoping they would pass by without incident. "Hey, you," Officer Bennett called out, his voice sharp and commanding. "Come here." Jamal stopped, his pulse quickening. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting Bennett's cold blue gaze. "Yes, sir?" Jamal asked, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. "We've had reports of theft in this area," Bennett said, his tone dripping with suspicion. "You match the description." Jamal blinked in disbelief. I haven't done anything. I'm just walking home from school." "Is that right?" Bennett stepped closer, towering over the boy. "Mind if we check your bag?" Jamal's hands trembled as he unzipped his backpack, revealing textbooks, notebooks, and the small robot parts he had been working on. The younger officer rummaged through the items, tossing them carelessly onto the ground. "Nothing here," the younger officer muttered, but Bennett wasn't satisfied. He grabbed Jamal by the shoulder and forced him to turn around, pressing him against the park's metal fence. Jamal's breath caught in his throat as he felt the rough hands of authority patting him down, his body shaking with humiliation. "Stay still," Bennett ordered, but Jamal's fear was palpable. A small crowd began to gather at a distance, whispering among themselves. The shame burned in Jamal's chest, and tears stung his eyes. He had done nothing wrong, and yet here he was, treated like a criminal for simply existing. From the cafe across the street, Amanda Bennett sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone for the latest updates on local news. She had spent years as a journalist trying to uncover corruption in Willowbrook, but every lead seemed to hit a dead end. The town was good at keeping its secrets buried. A commotion outside caught her attention, and Amanda glanced out the window. Her breath hitched when she saw her brother, Brian, forcefully pressing a young boy against the park's fence. The boy looked terrified, his belongings scattered on the ground. Without thinking, Amanda stood up, her instincts as both a journalist and a human being kicking in. She rushed outside, pulling her phone from her pocket, her hands shaking as she began recording the scene. "Brian, what are you doing?" she muttered under her breath. She watched in horror as Brian continued to search the boy, ignoring the crowd gathering nearby. Her brother's face was unreadable, cold, and methodical. Amanda knew this wasn't just a routine stop. It was something much darker. She had always known Brian harbored prejudices, but seeing it unfold before her eyes was different. The boy, Jamal, Amanda remembered, looked familiar. He was a local kid, a good student, and certainly not a thief. Amanda's stomach twisted in knots. She knew she had to do something. But what? Confronting her brother could mean more than just a family fight. It could mean ruining his career. By the time Jamal was released, his heart was pounding in his chest. His hands trembled as he gathered his scattered belongings, stuffing them hastily into his bag. He could feel the stares of the onlookers, their murmurs echoing in his ears. The shame was overwhelming, his throat tight as he struggled to hold back tears. He didn't look at the officers as he walked away, his legs weak beneath him. He just wanted to get home, to find solace in the familiar walls of the small house he shared with his mother. Each step felt like a battle, the weight of the humiliation pressing down on him with every breath. When he finally reached home, Jamal found his mother, Patricia, in the kitchen. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "Jamal, what happened?" Jamal couldn't hold it in any longer. The tears came, spilling down his cheeks as he recounted the encounter with the police. Patricia's face hardened with each word, her hands clenching into fists. "They had no right," she said, her voice low and furious. "No right at all." "I didn't do anything, Mom," Jamal sobbed. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know, baby. I know." Patricia wrapped her arms around him, her own heart breaking for her son. "We're going to fix this. I promise you." Later that night, Amanda sat alone in her small apartment, the video she had recorded playing on a loop on her phone. The sounds of the confrontation filled the room, but it was Brian's face that haunted her. The cold, detached expression as he humiliated an innocent boy, a boy whose only crime was the color of his skin. Amanda had spent years fighting for justice, trying to expose the ugly truth of Willowbrook's underbelly, but now the truth hit closer to home than she had ever imagined. Her own brother was part of the problem. Her finger hovered over the share button. Once she posted the video, there would be no going back. It would ruin Brian's reputation, possibly destroy their family. But how could she stay silent? The decision weighed heavily on her. Amanda leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen, the faces of Jamal and Brian etched in her mind. This wasn't just about her brother. It was about justice. It was about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, Amanda pressed the button. The video uploaded in seconds, the world about to see what she had seen. Her phone buzzed with notifications almost immediately. The town wouldn't stay silent for long. Amanda sat in her living room, the glow of her phone screen casting a pale light on her face. The video of the incident had already spread online, racking up comments and shares at a rapid pace. Some supported her decision to post it, but others were quick to accuse her of betraying her own family. The weight of those accusations hung heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't spoken to Brian since the incident, and the thought of confronting him filled her with a knot of dread. But she knew it had to be done. Steeling herself, she picked up her phone and dialed his number. "Hey," she began, her voice unsteady when Brian answered. "What do you want, Amanda?" His tone was sharp, defensive. He already knew why she was calling. "I saw what happened with the boy in the park," she said carefully. "I recorded it. I posted it online." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line before Brian's voice came back, cold and angry. "You what?" "I couldn't stay quiet, Brian." "You went too far," Amanda insisted, her heart pounding in her chest. "He was just a kid. He didn't do anything wrong, and you humiliated him." "He matched the description of a suspect," Brian snapped. "I was doing my job. You wouldn't understand. This isn't about doing your job. It's about how you treated him because of the color of his skin," Amanda shot back. "I saw you, Brian. I saw how you looked at him." Brian's voice lowered, simmering with rage. "You think you know everything because you write for the paper? You have no idea what it's like out here, Amanda. You don't know what it takes to keep this town safe." Amanda bit her lip, trying to steady herself. "I'm not your enemy, Brian. But what you did, it's wrong. And you need to own up to it." "I don't need a lecture from you," Brian said, his voice icy. "You've already betrayed me by posting that video. Don't pretend you care about my side of this." The line went dead. Amanda stared at the phone in her hand, the silence in the room pressing in on her. Her relationship with Brian, already strained, felt as though it had shattered beyond repair. But she couldn't back down now, not after what she'd seen. The next morning, Amanda made her way to the Willowbrook Gazette, the local newspaper office where she worked. The smell of ink and paper filled the small space, the familiar sound of typewriters clacking in the background as reporters worked on their latest stories. She headed straight for her editor's office, a sinking feeling in her stomach. "Hey, Matt," Amanda said, stepping into the office. Her editor, Matt Briggs, looked up from his desk, his brow furrowed as he skimmed the morning headlines. "I saw the video you posted," he said without looking up. "It's making waves." Amanda nodded, unsure of where the conversation was headed. "Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention. I wanted to talk about running a follow-up story in the Gazette." Matt finally looked up, leaning back in his chair. "Amanda, the video's one thing, but running a full story? That's different. You know how this town is." Amanda crossed her arms, a sense of frustration bubbling up. "What do you mean, how this town is?" You mean they don't want to acknowledge the racism that's right in front of their faces? Matt sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Look, I'm on your side here, but the town isn't ready for that kind of exposure. People will push back. Hard. We have advertisers, we have readers. We can't afford to stir up too much trouble. Amanda's frustration deepened. So, we just let it go? Pretend it didn't happen? That kid was humiliated for no reason, Matt. Someone has to speak up. Matt shook his head. I'm not saying we don't address it, but we have to be careful. This town is stuck in its ways. Pushing too hard could backfire. Amanda felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Backfire? It's already blown up, Matt. The video is out there, and people are talking. We can't sweep this under the rug. Matt met her gaze, the tension between them palpable. I'll think about it, Amanda, but no promises. Amanda left the office, her fists clenched at her sides. The reluctance to confront the town's deep-seated racism infuriated her, but she knew she couldn't rely on the Gazette to take a stand. If the town wouldn't face the truth, she would have to find another way. Amanda had barely made it back to her apartment when her phone rang again. It was her mother. She hesitated before answering, bracing herself for what she knew would be a difficult conversation. Amanda, what were you thinking? Her mother's voice came through the line, thick with disapproval. Mom, I had to do something. What Brian did was wrong, and people need to know, Amanda replied, her voice steady but tired. Your brother is a good man, her mother insisted. He's been working hard in this town for years. You're going to ruin his career over one mistake? This isn't just one mistake, Mom, Amanda said, trying to stay calm. This is part of something bigger. It's not just about Brian. It's about how people like Jamal are treated in this town every day. Her mother's voice grew sharp. You don't know what it's like for Brian. He's under so much pressure. And now you've made him look like the bad guy in front of the whole town. I'm not trying to make him look bad. I'm trying to hold him accountable, Amanda said, frustration creeping into her voice. If we don't stand up against this, nothing will ever change. Her mother was quiet for a moment, then sighed heavily. You don't understand, Amanda. Family is all we have. And now you've turned your back on your own brother. Amanda swallowed hard, the words cutting deep. I haven't turned my back on him, Mom. I'm just trying to do what's right. But even as she said the words, Amanda felt the weight of her family's disapproval settling over her. The rift between her and her brother was widening, and her parents' refusal to see the truth only made it worse. Later that afternoon, Amanda received an unexpected call from Patricia Anderson. She hadn't spoken to Jamal's mother in years, but Patricia's voice was calm and steady, despite the turmoil she must have been feeling. Amanda, I saw the video, Patricia said. Thank you for posting it. Amanda leaned against the kitchen counter, relief washing over her. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Patricia's voice softened. I appreciate that, but we need more than a video. We need people to listen, to take this seriously. I'm trying, Amanda said. I've been pushing for a story at the Gazette, but they're hesitating. Patricia sighed. That's not surprising. This town has been hiding from the truth for a long time. I'm not giving up, Amanda assured her. I'll do whatever I can to make sure people hear Jamal's story. Thank you, Amanda, Patricia said quietly. We can't let this go. Amanda hung up the phone, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Patricia's determination mirrored her own, and it fueled her resolve to keep fighting, no matter the obstacles in her path. As night fell, Amanda sat once again in front of her computer, staring at the comments flooding in on the video she had posted. The town was already divided, some demanding accountability from the police, others defending Brian and dismissing the incident as an overreaction. The decision weighed heavily on her. She knew that if she published a full story, there would be no turning back. Her relationship with Brian would likely never recover, and her family would see her as a traitor. But she couldn't shake the image of Jamal's face, the fear and humiliation she had witnessed firsthand. Amanda opened a blank document, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her heart pounded as she began to type, the words coming faster and faster as she poured her thoughts onto the page. She detailed the incident, the systemic racism that plagued the town, and the need for justice. When she was finished, Amanda sat back, reading over the article. She knew what she had to do. With a deep breath, she sent the article to Matt, attaching a message. This story needs to be told. No more holding back. The response was swift. Let's run it tomorrow. Amanda closed her laptop, her chest tight with a mix of fear and determination. The story was set in motion, and there was no turning back now. By the time the sun rose over Willowbrook, the video of Jamal's humiliation had already spread across social media, reaching every corner of the town. As Amanda walked through the town square, she could feel the weight of the stairs on her back. The quiet, picturesque square seemed tense, as if everyone were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Outside the cafe, two men stood talking in low voices. Amanda caught snippets of their conversation as she passed. "Did you see that video? The kid didn't do anything wrong," one of them said. "Yeah, but you know how things are here." "It's not the first time something like that's happened," the other replied, shaking his head. Amanda walked faster, her stomach twisting. She had expected backlash, but the tension in the air was palpable. Some of the residents were sympathetic to Jamal, but others, those who preferred to ignore the town's ugly history, were defending the police. Willowbrook, a town that prided itself on its peaceful facade, was now divided. As Amanda approached the Gazette office, she saw a group of women clustered together, their eyes narrowing as they whispered. "That girl," one of them said, just loud enough for Amanda to hear. "She betrayed her own brother." Amanda clenched her jaw, forcing herself to keep walking. She had known this would happen, but it didn't make it any easier to face. The lines were being drawn, and the town was choosing sides. Inside the Gazette office, Amanda barely had time to sit down at her desk before her phone buzzed. It was Brian. Her heart sank as she stared at the screen, knowing this conversation wasn't going to end well. She answered reluctantly. "Brian, what the hell were you thinking?" Brian's voice was sharp, his anger crackling through the phone like static. "You posted that video, and now everyone in town thinks I'm some kind of racist thug." Amanda took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "I didn't make you look like anything, Brian. I just showed the truth." "The truth?" Brian scoffed. "You don't know anything about what it's like to be a cop in this town. You don't understand the kind of pressure we're under. That doesn't give you the right to treat Jamal the way you did," Amanda snapped, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "You humiliated him in front of everyone because of the color of his skin." Brian was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but still laced with anger. "You've ruined everything, Amanda. Our family, our relationship. Do you even care?" Amanda swallowed hard. She hadn't wanted to destroy her relationship with her brother, but she couldn't ignore what she had seen. "I care, Brian, but I can't stand by and let this happen. It's not just about you. It's about the bigger picture." "Well, congratulations," Brian said bitterly. "You've blown up our whole family." He hung up before Amanda could respond, leaving her staring at the phone in her hand. She had known this would be hard, but the reality of how much damage her decision had caused was hitting her all at once. Later that day, Amanda made her way to the Willowbrook police station. She had agreed to meet with the police chief, who had requested a conversation after the video had gone viral. The building, with its cold, gray stone walls and utilitarian design, seemed even more imposing than usual. Inside, the air was tense. Officers avoided eye contact with Amanda as she walked through the halls, their conversations dropping to hushed murmurs. She knocked on the door to Chief Sullivan's office, her heart pounding in her chest. "Come in," a gruff voice called from the other side. Amanda pushed open the door and stepped inside. Chief Sullivan, a burly man with a thinning head of hair and a hard-set jaw, gestured for her to sit. His face was a mask of professionalism, but Amanda could see the tension in his eyes. "I suppose you know why I asked you to come," Sullivan began, folding his hands on the desk in front of him. "I figured," Amanda replied, keeping her voice calm. "It's about the video." Sullivan nodded. "Look, Amanda, you've caused quite a stir with that post. The department is under a lot of pressure right now, and we don't need any more negative attention." "Negative attention?" Amanda couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped her. "The attention is only negative because of what your officers did." Sullivan's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not here to debate that with you. What I'm saying is, we need to find a way to handle this without it turning into a full-blown scandal. You mean without holding anyone accountable? Amanda said, her frustration growing. You want me to back off, pretend like this didn't happen? Sullivan leaned forward, his expression hardening. What I want is for you to consider the consequences of what you're doing. You've already driven a wedge between you and your brother. How far are you willing to go? Amanda met his gaze, her resolve unshaken. As far as it takes to get justice for Jamal. Sullivan's face tightened, and for a moment, Amanda thought he might say something else. But instead, he leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Just be careful, Amanda. You're playing with fire. That evening, Amanda met Patricia Anderson at the community center. The small, worn-down building was usually a quiet place, but tonight, it was filled with a growing crowd of people, neighbors, friends, and local activists who had seen the video and wanted to take action. Patricia stood at the front of the room, her face calm but determined. Jamal sat quietly next to her, his eyes downcast. Amanda could see the toll the past few days had taken on him. His usual bright energy had been replaced by a quiet heaviness. Thank you all for coming, Patricia began, her voice steady. What happened to my son was wrong. But it's not just about Jamal. This has been happening in Willowbrook for too long, and it's time we stand up and say, enough. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Amanda felt a surge of pride for Patricia's courage. Despite everything she had been through, she was standing tall, ready to fight for justice. We're organizing a protest, Patricia continued. We need as many people as possible to join us and make it clear that we won't tolerate this kind of treatment anymore. Amanda watched as more and more people raised their hands, volunteering to help. The room buzzed with a new energy, an energy of resistance, of hope. For the first time, Amanda felt like change might actually be possible. Later that night, Amanda returned home, exhausted but hopeful. She had barely settled on the couch when her phone rang again. This time, it was her father. Amanda, we need to talk, he said, his voice serious. I figured this was coming, Amanda replied, bracing herself. Her father's tone was sharp. Your mother and I have been talking, and we think you need to take that video down. Amanda's heart sank. Dad, I can't do that. What happened to Jamal was wrong. People need to see it. This is tearing our family apart, Amanda, her father insisted. Your brother is hurting, and now the whole town is divided. Is this really worth it? Yes, it is, Amanda said firmly. It's worth it because it's the truth, and I can't just ignore that. Her father's voice softened, but there was still a note of frustration. We just don't want to see you lose everything over this. Your career, your family, there's a lot at stake. I know that, Dad. But there's even more at stake if we don't do anything, Amanda said, her voice steady. I'm not backing down. Not this time. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before her father spoke again. I hope you know what you're doing, Amanda. I do, she replied softly. When the call ended, Amanda sat in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of her decision settling over her once again. The divide between her and her family had never felt wider, but she knew there was no turning back now. The truth was out, and she was prepared to fight for it. Amanda sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the computer screen. She had spent the better part of the day combing through old police records, searching for any pattern or history that could point to systemic issues in the Willowbrook Police Department. As she scrolled through case after case, a clear pattern began to emerge. There were far too many incidents involving young black men, all of which were eerily similar to Jamal's. Unjustified stops, aggressive searches, and, most telling of all, a lack of formal complaints being investigated. Amanda leaned back in her chair, a knot forming in her stomach. She printed out the records and spread them across her desk, highlighting the ones that stood out the most. It wasn't just one or two cases. There were dozens, all swept under the rug. Brian had been involved in more than a few of them. She clenched her jaw, feeling the weight of her discovery. This was bigger than just Jamal and Brian. It was about the entire culture of the police force in Willowbrook, a force that had been operating with impunity for years. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Patricia. Any news? Amanda typed back quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm finding a lot. I'll come by soon." As she gathered the papers and prepared to head out, she couldn't shake the feeling that this investigation was about to reveal something far more personal than she had anticipated. Amanda arrived at Patricia's house, the air thick with tension as she knocked on the door. Patricia opened it with a somber smile, leading Amanda inside. Jamal sat quietly at the kitchen table, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. He had been quieter since the protest had been announced, the weight of the town's scrutiny pressing down on him. "I've been digging through the police records," Amanda began, sitting down across from Patricia. She spread the highlighted reports on the table. "There's a pattern here. It's not just about Jamal. The police have been targeting young black men in this town for years." Patricia's eyes darkened as she scanned the papers. "I always knew there was something wrong, but seeing it all laid out like this," she trailed off, shaking her head. "It's worse than I thought." Jamal looked up, his voice soft but firm. "What are we going to do about it?" Amanda paused, unsure of how to answer. She had expected resistance from the town, but the depth of the corruption and the community's willingness to ignore it felt insurmountable. "We keep pushing. I'm going to publish an expose on the police department. It's time the town sees what's really been happening." Patricia nodded, her resolve hardening. "We'll be with you every step of the way. They can't silence all of us." But as Amanda looked at the reports, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to uncover. Something closer to home, something buried deep in her family's past. Brian's descent into desperation had been swift. The pressure of the town's outrage, combined with Amanda's relentless pursuit of the truth, had pushed him to his breaking point. He sat in his dimly lit living room, a bottle of whiskey on the coffee table in front of him, his hands shaking as he poured himself another glass. His phone buzzed with a series of missed calls and messages from their parents, urging him to speak to Amanda, to make things right. But Brian knew it wasn't that simple. The more Amanda uncovered, the more his own career and reputation were at risk. He had always justified his actions by telling himself that he was protecting the town, keeping order. But now, that justification felt paper-thin. He hadn't spoken to Amanda since their heated argument, and the silence between them only deepened his isolation. The whiskey burned as he took a long drink, his mind spinning with memories of past arrests, of times he had looked the other way when things had gone too far. He had been part of the system for so long that he wasn't sure where his own sense of morality began and the job ended. Brian stared at his phone, considering calling Amanda, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Not yet. Not when everything was spiraling out of control. He wasn't ready to face the truth about himself. Amanda returned home late that evening, her mind racing with thoughts of the article she was preparing to write. But as she stepped inside, something caught her eye. A box of old family photographs had been left out on the coffee table, likely left there by her mother during one of her recent visits. Curiosity piqued. Amanda sat down and began flipping through the photos. Most of them were familiar, images of birthdays, holidays, and childhood memories. But one photograph made her pause. It was a black and white photo of her parents, much younger, standing in front of a house she didn't recognize. Her father had his arm around another man, one Amanda had never seen before. The man's face was solemn, his dark skin stark against the pale background of the house. Amanda flipped the photo over. Scribbled in faint ink were the words, "James Anderson and Edward Bennett, 1976. Anderson. The name hit her like a punch to the gut. It couldn't be a coincidence. She raced to her computer, pulling up her notes on Jamal's family history. As she traced the Anderson name back, her worst fears were confirmed. The man in the photo, James Anderson, was Jamal's grandfather, and the house in the photo had belonged to Amanda's family. Amanda's hands trembled as she pieced together the implications. Her family and Jamal's were connected in ways she had never imagined. Whatever had happened between their families decades ago had been buried, but now it was surfacing, threatening to upend everything. The next morning, Amanda sat across from her parents in their pristine living room. Her mother had set out coffee and pastries, but Amanda's stomach churned too much to eat. She clutched the photograph in her hand, waiting for the right moment to confront them. Finally, she couldn't wait any longer. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" she asked, holding up the photo. Her mother's face went pale, her eyes darting to her husband. He cleared his throat, but the silence between them spoke volumes. "Amanda, that was a long time ago," her father said, his voice tight. "There's no need to dig into the past." "No need?" Amanda's voice rose, her anger bubbling to the surface. "This man, James Anderson, was Jamal's grandfather. And you've never said a word about it?" Her mother placed a hand on her father's arm, as if to steady him. "We didn't think it was relevant anymore. We've tried to move past all of that." "All of what?" Amanda demanded. "What happened between our families?" Her father sighed heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "James and I, we had a falling out. There were issues in the town, racial tensions. Things got heated. We drifted apart, and over time, we lost contact. When the Anderson family moved away, we didn't think it would matter anymore." Amanda stared at them, disbelief washing over her. "So, you just buried it? You never thought that maybe, just maybe, this would come back to haunt us?" Her mother's voice was soft, almost pleading. "Amanda, we were trying to protect you. We didn't want you to be dragged into the past." "Well, it's too late for that," Amanda said, her voice cold. "The past is already here. And now I have to figure out how to fix this mess." She stood abruptly, her heart pounding in her chest as she stormed out of the house. The weight of her family's secrets felt crushing, but she knew there was no turning back now. Whatever had happened between the Andersons and Bennetts had been kept in the shadows for too long. It was time to bring the truth into the light. Amanda sat in the quiet of her apartment, her mind still reeling from the discovery. The photograph of her father and James Anderson, Jamal's grandfather, lay on the table in front of her like a silent accusation. She had spent the last few days investigating every angle of the police misconduct, but she had never expected to find her own family tied to the Andersons in such a profound way. Her phone buzzed. It was Patricia. Amanda hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Amanda, I need to talk to you." Patricia's voice sounded strained. "There's something about our families that I think you need to know." Amanda's heart pounded. "I found an old photograph," she began, "of my father and your father. I didn't know our families were connected." There was silence on the other end of the line before Patricia spoke again, her voice filled with both surprise and resignation. "I didn't know either. But it makes sense now, doesn't it? The way our families have been intertwined, even if we didn't realize it. What happened between our fathers?" Amanda asked, her throat dry. "I'm not sure of all the details," Patricia admitted. "But I know there was tension. There were incidents in town, things that divided people back then, and it must have been enough to drive a wedge between our families." Amanda sighed, rubbing her temple. The revelation had shifted everything for her, and now it wasn't just about justice for Jamal. It was about reckoning with the hidden past that had shaped both of their families. "I think I need to speak to Jamal," Amanda said softly. "He deserves to know the truth." Patricia agreed. "He does. And maybe, once everything's in the open, we can finally start to heal." Brian was unraveling. The weight of everything Amanda had uncovered pressed down on him like a crushing tide. He sat in his darkened living room, staring at the empty bottle on the coffee table. He hadn't been able to think straight since Amanda had begun her investigation, and now the pieces were falling apart faster than he could hold them together. He had been avoiding everyone. His parents, his colleagues, even Amanda. He couldn't face them, not after everything that had come to light. The thought of Jamal's face, the boy's fear and humiliation, haunted him. But what haunted him even more was the truth Amanda had uncovered, that he and Jamal were connected in ways he had never imagined. Brian gripped the edge of the couch, his knuckles white. He didn't know how to process the revelation. All these years, he had justified his actions, convinced himself that he was doing his job, that he was protecting the town. But now he knew the truth. Jamal wasn't just another kid in Willowbrook. He was family. A sudden wave of anger and self-loathing surged through him, and in a fit of frustration, Brian swiped the empty bottle off the table, sending it crashing to the floor. The shattering glass mirrored the fracturing pieces of his life. He couldn't escape this. Not anymore. Jamal sat in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. His life turned upside down by the police encounter, the protest, and now the realization that there were secrets buried deep in his family's history. He couldn't stop thinking about the photograph Amanda had shown him, his grandfather, James Anderson, standing next to Amanda's father. It was strange, seeing them together, knowing that they had once been close. But something had torn them apart, something that no one had ever spoken about. His mother had tried to explain, but even she didn't know the full story. All Jamal knew was that his family had suffered because of the racism that had festered in Willowbrook for generations. And now, it was his responsibility to fight back, to make sure that history didn't keep repeating itself. But the weight of it all felt crushing. How could he, just a kid, stand up to a system that had been in place for so long? How could he make a difference when it seemed like everything was stacked against him? Jamal clenched his fists, determination flaring in his chest. He couldn't give up. He wouldn't. His family had already been through so much, and he wasn't going to let their struggles be in vain. He was going to fight. For himself. For his family. For the truth. Patricia sat across from Amanda at the kitchen table, her hands clasped tightly around a mug of coffee. The room was quiet, save for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Patricia had spent the past few days reflecting on the truth that had surfaced, truth she had never fully understood until now. "I never thought our families were connected like this," Patricia said quietly, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her mug. "But now that I know, it all makes sense. The way this town has treated us, the way things have always been just under the surface." Amanda nodded, her expression somber. "I've been thinking about it a lot too. There's so much we don't know about the past, about what happened between our fathers." Patricia looked up, her gaze steady. "But we do know this. The racism in this town, the way they've treated Jamal and so many others, it's been built on years of silence. Years of people looking the other way." Amanda felt a surge of anger at the thought. "We can't let that continue. We need to expose everything. The corruption in the police department, the history between our families. People need to see the truth." Patricia's voice was firm as she replied, "I agree. And I'm ready to stand with you. We'll face whatever comes next together." For the first time in weeks, Amanda felt a sense of hope. The pieces of the past were finally coming together, and now they had a chance to bring real change to Willowbrook. Amanda stood in her apartment, papers and files scattered across the floor. The article she had been working on was almost finished, but the weight of what was about to happen settled heavily on her shoulders. She knew that once she published this story, there would be no going back. She had gathered everything: the police records, the history of misconduct, the photograph of her father and James Anderson. The truth was undeniable, and she was ready to expose it all. But the final step was confronting Brian. Her phone buzzed with a message from her editor. "We're ready when you are." Amanda took a deep breath and picked up her phone, scrolling to Brian's number. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed call. Brian answered on the second ring, his voice rough. "Amanda." "We need to talk," Amanda said, her voice steady. "I'm publishing this story." There was a long pause on the other end. When Brian finally spoke, his voice was strained. "You don't understand what this is going to do. To me. To our family." "I do understand," Amanda replied softly. "But this is bigger than us. It's about the truth. And you need to face it." Brian didn't respond immediately, and Amanda could hear the tension in his breathing. "Meet me tomorrow," he said finally. "We'll talk then." Amanda agreed, ending the call with a sense of finality. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. She would confront Brian, expose the truth, and finally bring the secrets of Willowbrook into the light.